Sick of being broke, 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 sick of being broke. I'm sick of it, sick of it. Yeah. I'm sick of getting off my brain, trying to figure out if I'm to blame. 'Cause money's late, even though I do my part.
But hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Abena Berry. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and therapist. I also am a speaker and author of this book. This is where I pack all my orders, so the books are check out the book. That's not the purpose of this particular live. I know I usually go live and talk about my book a lot, but that's not the focus for today. But if you do want to check out my book, you can simply go to my page. There is a LINK in my bio, because I'm not sure if I have TikTok, right? And so you can just click on it and everything is in my LINK tree, including the link to the book, so you can see reviews and all of that. But yes, I am a psychologist. And here is Deahna Joi. Deahna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, this I feel like is an overdue conversation, not just for us, but also I feel like everybody needs to hear this conversation. Yes. From my point of view, I'm Deahna Joi. I'm an accountant for the last 17 years. And also I am a yogi. I'm for the last 12 years, for a fun fact for you, but also I am a grant writer. And so I've been in the financial world for so long, and so many things have overlapped that I have like grown to love the grant writing world just because it was really where I came from. But not realizing my skills can be overlapped into the grant world until probably about 5 years ago. So it's still the newest thing for me, but it's also something I feel like I've been doing for so long that I am proud to say my family are all entrepreneurs. And so I learned from them. And then I'm the baby of the family. And so I kind of watched everybody do their own endeavors. And when it came to my time, I realized finances was the one area that nobody really was like clear on in my family. And so we always had an accountant come in. So I was sitting at the table for taxes like at 7, 8 years old. So I was preparing myself for the accounting world before I even knew it was going to be my world.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I want to hear more, but then I
good. So, but yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at, and I'm excited really to just have this conversation today because so many people underestimate the fact that your mental and your money are like they're one in each other like every day. Yeah. So I always go about things by a holistic point of view because so many of us have bad habits that we almost inherited, not necessarily knew that we were taking them in. And so a lot of times that's more my accountability kind of checks in is really rewiring that element. And that's why I'm also an author now as of this year. My first ebook is called Rewrite.
Send it to me. I didn't know you had a book out also.
Yes. It actually came out August. Yeah, in August.
Well, we're gonna say mine came out July 22nd. So we kind of dropped at the same time.
I love it.
I can definitely get your book and support.
Yeah, appreciate you. Yeah, my intentions for the book is for young adults to really have that concept of rewiring their financial future. And that's what the book is called as well. And I said it rewiring because while I was in my research of things, I realized your money mindset is really set by age 7. And I was like, oh, well, that seemed okay. That makes sense. Like me sitting at the accounting table is not scared at all, talking about numbers when I really didn't know what I was getting into. But now it's just kind of like I have such a passion and everything else with it because there's so much more going on that today that I realize finance is missing. And it really is stemmed from like the real foundation of financial literacy. So many of us don't have that. And that's really where the scarcity and other things kind of really come in play. So, yeah.
I love that. I was also so cool to hear that like this like goes back for you so far from like early years. The same is true for me with just wanting to learn about psychology and human behavior, emotion, and thought. I started studying this stuff actually when I was like 8 years old. So it's been a long journey and love affair with wanting to understand myself and other humans. And so, yeah, it's always really cool to hear and meet other people who kind of figured out their soul's purpose very early on, or at least one of your soul's
right.
work. And what you're here to do. So I think that's so cool because like it's very similar.
It is. I love it.
Yeah, amazing. So yeah, I want to kind of piggyback off of what you said too about like the money mindset and how that's set by around 7 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's two main things that are going to play a role with that, right? We're going to have the like generational pieces, right? I firmly believe that, and personally in reincarnation, and that we've all had past lives and all that stuff, and we're passing things down from our ancestors. We passed it. Like there are these like soul beliefs that are sometimes subconsciously still impacting you, but also even outside of the spiritual side of things, there's this other piece where we are being conditioned always. Like you can't not be conditioned. So conditioning simply means like we're being influenced by every experience we have, words we hear, things we're seeing. And so since we're all being conditioned, especially when you are, a little human, you're potentially like you're really susceptible, right, to whatever is being modeled around you. So if there is more of a scarcity mindset or whatever it may be around how money is being managed, or even learned helplessness, I have a whole chapter of that in my book to help people understand how that mindset is scientifically linked to depression, but it also shows up with money, right? Really relates to that, right? And so for people who don't know, learned helplessness, the short of it is that if a human being is put in a situation where they're having adverse experiences, especially if they're having many adverse experiences back to back, or if they're having just one adverse experience that's chronic, that over time, if you are not able to find a solution or relief for that stress, you can start to develop what's known as learned helplessness, which is basically like a mental prison. It's a mindset that feels like a mental prison where you think that there's nothing in your control to change your circumstances, even though that's not the case. But it's very powerful. Like the mind and our beliefs are very powerful. So if somebody ends up in that mentality, it can be hard to shift it. And most of the time people end up there because they have a lot of people around them with learned helplessness, right? And if you're a child growing up in that environment, you're going to be conditioned, and that can absolutely affect money.
Absolutely.
Money management.
Yeah. And for me, even the realization of just like, I guess my financial literacy compared to my peers wasn't until I went to college and realized how like far off others were compared to just myself. And that's when literally Budgetsbyjoi was like started, because I was giving like the same advice back to back, or I was sharing the same budget to people. And it was something that came so natural to me that I didn't understand like where did not hit for y'all. But it really is the fact that I had family entrepreneurs. So like we never were off not talking about certain things. And there are certain elements that come in play that I feel like I'm grateful that I had it, but underestimated like me growing up and just knowing a second job was a second job, but not realizing it was our family job. So it's kind of like, I'm grateful and totally different mindset now than I was in a teenager. After school things, like now I can see it in a different light, but it's definitely really just what started it all. And now I'm like, I will never change like my view, because I just want to change the world so much more now.
I love that. I love that. No, the passion, you can feel the passion that you have. So that's awesome. This is such an important thing. Fortunately, unfortunately, however we want to put it, at one point in time in history, humans created money. Yeah. I have mixed feelings about that, if I'm being honest. But at this point, it's a central part of our existence until if sometime in the future we decide to get rid of it or change it in some kind of way. But we created it, and now it's a part of our society. So it's like, well, you got to learn how to manage it and have it and all of that, because now it's a part of survival, essentially. There's so many ways that you can end up in debt and in, unfortunate circumstances, especially. I would say I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Deahna, too. I feel like the internet has increased the likelihood of debt for people because it's so easy to order things.
Yes.
It's so easy to just press buy now or whatever, or to Uber Eats or whatever it may be. So I'm curious, like with your clients and with the work that you do, how does that play a role in what happens for people in their finances.
Yeah, that is one thing. Like when I go over line items, for me, I will always be the person to be like, so I'm going to tell you now, we're separating grocery run from our go out and drive throughs and restaurant sit downs. Like those are two separate line items because some are great, some are unnecessary, some are other elements to it. And then if I remember one time one of my friends, she just came on my live probably a couple of 3 years back now I think about it. But it was like the beginning era of that DoorDash and Uber Eats. And we tallied up pretty much that she was $3,000 a year that's going out to Uber Eats. And just because she goes 2 or 3 days out of the week from work, and it was the first time she ever told it up, and she was like in shock. And it was kind of like, okay, so this is why we look at the whole picture and not just today's total.
Right. $10.12. It's like today. That's not all you spent.
Yes. And then even one of my friends in here now, Palm, she welcome in. Thanks for tuning in. But she is one of those people who makes me feel grateful for just the accountability, because sometimes you underestimate like what that one check-in can do for you. Like other people who will be like, oh, I don't want to hear from it or anything else, but those who want to see the changes, you can see different behaviors and like totally different than those who are like, oh, my Uber Eats, it is what it is. Like those who like it, there's no thought to it.
A little bit of that is the learned helplessness too, right? Like, it really is like the more that you feel like your life is out of your hands or your control, the more likely you are to kind of have that attitude and response, right? So it really is a skill to, one, be self-aware, as well as it's a skill to want to also do self-management.
Yes.
It's not the same. So you can be self-aware and like aware of what you're doing, but still be like, I don't want to manage myself. And a lot of people are stuck in that kind of cycle. And then when they are met with the negative consequences of those things, right, because of the learned helplessness, they're not really seeing that it's like, but your choices are playing a big role in these outcomes. But we're also not to blame, right? Because if you're finding yourself in a state of learned helplessness, that's linked to depression. So, that's a very real thing, and it can work through. But it also starts with us rebuilding faith in ourselves and understanding that, like, no, you are, one, such a powerful force in this world, but two, also with it, when it comes with that power, you have free will, and your choices are like a big deal,
Right.
Like a massive deal. And so if you remind yourself of like, wait, I'm just making a bunch of choices every single day of all kinds and all types, really all you're doing. I also always say, like, even obligations are just fancy choices, right? Like, I mean, they just are. People be like, oh, I do this, so I'm obligated to. I'm like, no, but you have to choose to obligate yourself, right? Like, some people have kids and they don't obligate themselves to take care of them. That's how you know that obligations are fancy choices. So like, we have to be intentional around those things, because not only will it show up with like our mental health in general, but it'll affect every aspect of your life, including your money and how much you have of it or not.
Yes. And then I'm also curious of your, because I wonder how much of that element of getting closer to the depression state is also looped around the guilt, because I feel like a lot of people kind of come to me and we talk about how guilty they feel for even allowing it to get to this place, or they feel guilty for hoarding their money. Like, there's always some sort of guilt tied to like that financial element too, that I feel like sometimes I'm like, I'm not the psychiatrist here to help out with the other side to this coin. But it's definitely something like I've even personally been part of that. Like, I know it happens, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So shame and guilt are like all of our emotions. I always like to start here. Shame and guilt, when healthy shame and guilt, are like all of our emotions are there for a purpose. Those are the emotions that kind of fall into the category of they exist for like self-check-in purposes, right? They're kind of like the yellow stoplight or even the red stoplight sometimes, depending on what we got going on. But they're meant to serve as a way for us to assess our behavioral choices and things like that. However,
Mm-hmm.
There is a such thing as toxic shame and toxic guilt. And that develops from trauma experiences for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very complex in a way, because if you end up with where you're feeling like shame and guilt in a disproportionate way to the circumstances, or just frequently, even when you like really haven't done anything to merit those emotions, because our brain and our brain chemistry is constantly being affected by our experiences. So if you are growing up in an environment where you're constantly being shamed and guilted for, especially like, for instance, developmentally impossible expectations, right? Like, let's say your parents are expecting you at 3 years old to be able to regulate your emotions consistently. Right. You know that is impossible. Like, based on brain development, it is impossible. So if that is your foundation and your experiences, then over time that can start to show up in all kinds of ways in your life, right? Yeah. If there is a lot of shame around making mistakes, then that gets in the way of you being able to learn. I have a whole section in my book in chapter 2. Chapter 2 of my book is called Healing Your Relationship with Yourself. And part of that chapter, I have healing your relationship with making mistakes, because that's such an important thing that we all need, because that shame that you're describing and the guilt that you're describing can really keep people from behavioral change that they are very capable of. Yeah. Right. But it also requires us to face those hard truths about the ways that we've unintentionally caused ourselves additional distress. The only way out the cycle.
Yeah. So even with the behavioral elements, do you feel like there is harder to change when you are fully aware of it, or is it harder to change when you're like, just, it is what it is, it's the type of life?
I could say self-awareness is always a first step to change. I like to tell my clients, like, if you are self-aware and can own your growth areas. So I always use the term growth areas in my book. I do all that. I feel like the word flaws has a negative connotation, whereas growth areas is a reminder that we are all beings in perpetual evolution. There's no shame in having things you need to work on. That's literally the whole point of this experience, this whole simulation we're in. So like, it's growth areas. So what we want to be doing is identifying those growth areas, because that's the only way you can start to change something. So I would argue you would need self-awareness first. Okay. Like, right? Because if you don't know you have a flat tire, how are you going to know to change it? So usually people need to up their self-awareness, but it's like, you might be aware, but just don't want to accept it. Yeah. You know? Yeah.
That's a whole other side to it too. Yeah.
So it's because you can know something and be like, nah, I got a flat, but I'm gonna keep driving to see what happens.
Testing all the wheels, See
free will, man. That's why we gotta learn how to manage ourselves, because we are beings with free will. So
absolutely. So another element, I guess, depression kind of leads a lot of my clients where I meet them, is the fact that they're in a paralyzed state. Like, what they're doing is they feel like they can't change, or either the finances are like very stagnant, and they're not sure where to even start. And so my suggestions are kind of like just words, and it's not very much receptive of wanting to change just yet, because they're very paralyzed in that feeling.
Yes. Yeah. So something that would, and I can, if you send me your email, I can send you some like little worksheets, motivational interviewing. That's what you would probably want to, I know it's a weird term, but that's what we call it in psychology. But what motivational interviewing is, it's a therapeutic technique to help people who are in a state of resistance, right? To help them see how what they're currently doing doesn't align with goals that they have. Because it sounds like the clients, I mean, they wouldn't know you if there wasn't a goal to change things. So you're trying to help them bridge that gap, but it's really like a skill of meeting them where they're at. Because sometimes if you're like, hey, just do all these things and everything will be better, that can feel like the equivalent of somebody having depression and coming to me and saying, I'm depressed. And I'm like, well, have you tried not being sad? Right. Like, so motivational interviewing helps us kind of like work with the resistance, right? Okay. Instead of like jumping ahead and being miles away from them and be like, just come over here. You instead are like with them and saying like, I hear that you want this. So what do you feel like you can do right now? What is that smaller step? Right. And how can I meet you where you're at? So I can definitely send you some motivational interviewing stuff because you'll need it. It sounds
Yes, yeah. I feel like that will be right on time. Appreciate you. I come into those conversations and sometimes I like, even myself, like mentally I might not be at the best day myself to give you the motivation. So like I had to think about that of like, how should I go about it sometimes? And so like, because we're all human, I feel like we all make mistakes. And that's the thing where I feel like so many people underestimate, like, I'm telling this a lot of stuff from experience. And me being the youngest of my siblings, I watched also others do wrong that I didn't have to do that way. But I still got in some state this way because I'm an adult at some point. So we all had to figure it out. So I definitely feel like that motivational interviewing will be very helpful.
And reflective listening. I'm just writing these things.
No, you're good. I wrote a few things down myself.
I get to like send them to you because the other piece of this that would help would be reflective listening because empathy is truly the human superpower. It is what allows us, because we're all beings obviously having our own individual experience, right? No one can ever be in your body and experience your brain, but empathy is the one thing that allows us to get as close as humanly possible to that. Okay. And so when people feel seen and validated, then that's a game changer, and it really helps with the rolling with the resistance. So like validating the distress, validating for them that they feel like they can't make change, right? And all of that. And then, then trying to ride the, right. Because then they'll feel more seen because those emotions that are attached to those thoughts are very real for them. Right? Like when they say, I don't think I can do this, that is a real emotion that they are having and real thoughts that they're having. So we have to kind of meet them there and validate that. Like, yeah. Right. And it can also help to share in that humanness of like, I'm sure there's been times where you maybe had that emotion, but it was able to move through. So just kind of, again, empathy is us tapping into something within ourselves that allows for us to relate to what somebody else is experiencing. So yeah, I'm gonna say you some stuff because I know that see you're like, look at the road.
I love it. Yes.
Let's go down it. And I get that. Especially as a therapist, I get that. But there are definitely ways we have to it's just about meeting people where they at. Like that's what I call it, because that's really, really what it is. Yeah. And most of the people that you're coming across too, where they're feeling this stuck, you got to remember that a lot of the things that led to them feeling this stuck was that many people in their life did not take the time to see them. Yeah. Many people in their life did not hold space for them. So you can make such a difference just by doing that. Right? Most people did tell them, like when they're like, I'm depressed, they were like, well, did you try not being sad? Like that is what they've probably dealt with a lot of people.
Absolutely.
So they just need some validation and to be seen. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. So for a couple of years, I was partnered with a nonprofit who helped with housing assistance. And so I merged my financial literacy with them. And so it was like required every month. They had to do a budgeting meeting with myself. And I had literally every background from new people getting into adulthood, like 22, 21, to those with fixed income in their 70s. And so I had such a wide range of these individuals in this program that I learned a lot of things, I would say, in that time frame that like, I wish I would have came in with different mindset for this one conversation than I did with somebody else. But there's so many things that I feel like it was a learning curve for me, but I built so many good relationships too. But it is also moments where I'm like, we got out of the hole. I watched you get out of the hole. You got yourself back in this hole while in the time frame you didn't talk to me. So it was kind of like I was almost like mothering somebody else's mother, which was a whole other feeling. So it was a lot for me also, and I feel like that motivational interview probably would have been very helpful then too.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it's a game changer for sure. Okay, so because we were talking about self-awareness, right? And a piece of it too is because you just made a great point. And it's something this is something I always have to do. Every human has to do this if you're self-managing, but it's that we, meaning us as an individual, we know our story, like the life we've lived better than anyone, we're the one living it, right? But here's the thing. A lot of times people make the mistake of forgetting that a big chunk of why we're having these experiences in life is to pull out the lessons from them. Right? People have to teach you how to do that, right? So if you weren't taught critical thinking skills, if you weren't taught how to process your emotions, if you weren't taught any of those things, you're going to end up having a bunch of life, lived experiences and not learning anything from them, or very little. And then the cycle is going to continue. So you're helping your clients remember, like, hey, you did this before. Like, do you remember that? Like, that is an example of your capabilities.
Right.
And so a lot of it too is just the things that feel obvious aren't for people. Like they aren't. And it's about, like, even with trauma work, I have to often remind my clients, like, remember, you're supposed to be reminding yourself in the moment that when you have that intrusive thought, right, that is a product of the trauma you went through. And I know that you know that, but in that moment, you must ground yourself, right? You have to tell yourself that, even though you already know it, right? You have to have a conversation with yourself. So a lot of people forget that, like, self-talk, first of all, we're supposed to be doing it every day. I don't know who at what point was like, oh, if you're talking to yourself, you're crazy. First of all, if you're talking to yourself, you're self-aware. If you're not talking to yourself, you're not self-aware. So that's not good.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to talk to ourselves a lot. And then we're supposed to use the method that I talk about this in my book as well. Because I have a chapter on how to manage thoughts. Chapter 8 is called The Distorted Mind. It's all about managing anxious thoughts, intrusive thoughts, all that. And I teach in the book a technique that I use myself, because I used to have an anxiety disorder. So this technique definitely helped me overcome my anxiety disorder, amongst other things too, like my own time in therapy with my own therapist. But also I teach this to all my clients, because every human needs to know the rabbit hole method, in my opinion, which is, it's a method to deal with intrusive thoughts in a way that helps you move through and past them instead of diving into the rabbit hole. Okay. And so people really have to remind themselves, all of us, of the things we already know when we need to hear them most, right? Right. And so, like, if somebody is struggling to remember that they are capable of financial changes or whatever, it's like, hey, but what examples in your life do you have of that? Right? Already. You have to talk to yourself about it. It's so important. Hey, welcome in. Yeah, we're talking about money and mental wellness. Because, mental health is at the foundation of everything.
Absolutely that. I saw a comment come in earlier around.
Yeah, chapter 8 is managing thoughts. Yeah, yep. Oh,
no, I need to get this book. Go ahead. Yep.
Also, Andrea has a phenomenal book out also. So Andrea, y'all, just so you know, is Audacity is the plug. But yeah, she has an amazing book out also. There's a bunch of authors up in here.
Absolutely that. I will say TikTok has brought me around more authors quickly than anything.
Yeah, or just like more and more humans in general, I would say, that are remembering that we're creators, because we all are.
Something around. I can't remember, but it was something around. Yes. But they're family. So I know a lot of times, upbringing is definitely like how we all see so many things, but my curiosity is, for myself, I sometimes get in that mindset of forgetting what other people don't know. And I get very much in the bag I'm aware of. And then it's kind of like I have to forget, or I have to reel back and be like, not everybody knows what I know. And those are the moments where I feel like, I wish I was already written down in the book and I could just shove it to them or assign it to them before we talk. But my question to you is, what advice would you give me in regards of having those moments of...
I'm excited. Can you tell? I'm like, I can't even sit still. You just brought up, so people who are on my lives all the time already know why I'm excited. You just brought up one of my favorite topics, which is to help as many human beings possible unlearn the term common sense. I hate it. I hate it. Here's why. There is no such thing as common sense. Everything you know currently started from a place of not knowing, and you had to be taught. You either taught directly or through someone modeling it or whatever, but common sense does not exist. This is why if you take a toddler who's like 1.5 years old, you would not leave them in a bathroom by themselves, because they would probably go water and try to drink out the toilet. This is how we know right? That common sense does not exist because we don't know what a toilet is until someone teaches us. We don't know that they're dirty until someone teaches us. We don't know that you're not supposed to drink the water that's in it until someone teaches us. Everything is what I like to call learned sense. Okay. So that will help you replace common sense with the term learned sense. And then it will help you remember, like, okay, this person's response is letting me know that this is the area in which they're needing teaching. Because we're all each other's teachers, or we're supposed to. But we have some people trying to teach things they did not actually take the time to like learn thoroughly or whatever. But we're all the queen bee of something, multiple somethings. But the reason why there's so many of us is because it's impossible for any one human to be an expert in everything, right? Like, think of what everything is, right? You would be an expert in building tables. You would be an expert in cooking. You would be an expert in flying planes. Like, how can we all, right? That's impossible. But there are people who are experts in all of those things. We're supposed to go to each other for it. So what you're noticing in those moments where you're having a conversation with family or whoever else, and you're like, what are they talking about? Right? Like, this makes no sense. It's just revealing to you, like, oh, this is my area, one of my areas of expertise, and here's how I could be of service as the queen bee in this area. And then maybe you have a family member who's a mechanic or something. You're like, hey, I'll come to you when something happens to my car, right? We all got our skills and knowledge in something, and we're supposed to lean on each other.
Understood. No, I feel like that one clip will be sent to my whole family. Thank you very much.
You have some family members who are trying to be, because this is all of us trying to be the queen bee in areas that they know nothing about. And it's like, and there's no shame in that. But so many of us were traumatized when we made mistakes growing up, right? Like you were abused or whatever it is. So now you're so afraid of just being like, I'm wrong, or I don't know what I'm talking about. Like, your nervous system has been conditioned to think that that's the worst thing you could do, when in actuality, admitting to mistakes is the only way that you grow and learn.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I feel like that is one thing, being the youngest growing up. I got to see everybody make the mistakes and still survive. Like, the world still kept spinning. And so that's why I was never afraid to speak my voice. I was never that person. Because y'all taught me I can be this way. So
yeah,
I never have had that hesitation ever. So yeah, y'all created this monster.
I love it. But look, you've learned so much and you're growing because you're open to it. And I wish more and more people would just understand that once you are able, like, once you've gotten to a point where you have tamed your ego, I guess is the easiest way to put that. That's how you actually become quote unquote unstoppable, right? The people who are pretending like they know everything don't know much of any fucking.
Or just a little bit, saying they know something.
Like, I'm like, so you go to like Thanksgiving or something with your family member who's telling you about your mental health or trying to, right? And I tell my clients, I'd be like, okay, I want you to just look at them in the face, just full on, right? While they try to tell you all this, oh, you don't need to go to therapy, you don't need to talk to, I'm fine, look at me, right? All of that, right? And I want you to just be like, okay, what is the amygdala and what does it do? They can't answer that question. Don't take mental health advice from them. Ask them about a part of the brain, what it does. And if you can't answer that question, that is not someone to go to, right? And don't take your physical health stuff from them either, unless you have actual reason to believe that they are educated on these things, right? Like, I'm not going to go get surgery from, my uncle who's a garbage man. Like, you know what I mean? So why am I listening to this feedback? But I will talk to them about, like, how to handle my recycling well. We all are experts in different. It's all.
I love it. I had one more question.
Yeah.
Came up in the middle of that. And tame your ego.
Yeah.
When you said that, that's when I'm like, so that is a whole other thing. I feel like mental and money kind of overlap because of an ego. Because I've also come in contact with individuals who feel like I don't know enough about the topic. And instead of taking my advice, they'll go to somebody who is like, that's all they study. Okay, but my round elements of watching multiple businesses start in, like, I have a unique perspective that sometimes I feel like I don't need to advertise if you just would have listened. Like, we could have got to that point, but I feel like the ego definitely comes in play for money just as much as everything else. So, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, the ego is just because it's everything's because you were talking about balance earlier, right? Like just finding that balance with being able to like treat yourself sometimes or not, and all of that, and really self-management in general is about balance. So ego exists to some degree because it has a relationship to our self-esteem. But you also have to have a healthy, like, relationship with it and be taming it.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Bite you in the butt. And that will come up with money as well. Because, like, so if somebody's really, like, grandiose in their thinking, they're going to end up in debt.
Yeah.
Right?
Very quickly. Yeah.
Then they'll be calling you and crying and trying to figure out what they're going to do different, right? So, or maybe not, because their ego's so big, they can't even admit.
Yeah.
We have to tame it. Like, yes, we are all special and important. I firmly believe this. We are all special, important, and powerful. But also, humble yourself, because we are all special, important, and powerful. It's like that. It's just important to have that tamed. You said, I listened to my son, who's a financial advisor, concerning investing. I didn't know your son did that, Omar. That's so cool. Yeah, that's a nice thing to have in your family. Like, I'm sure your family is so happy to have you, D. Like, just like somebody to help you with money. What?
Yeah. My older brother uses me more than anybody. I'll definitely say I usually do his invoices. So yeah.
High on the list, like having an accountant in the family, a chef, a personal trainer.
Yeah. But the ego and self-sabotage. How much of that, because I feel like self-sabotage in financial world is almost like you were talking about before, getting into debt real easily, and or there's the other side to it of like you don't even want to spend the money you're earning. And I feel like self-sabotage kind of is either or so quickly and so harsh that it happens quite a bit. And I feel like there's so many things that I feel like I could advise somebody. But what would your advice be around just the element of just mental coming in play for self-sabotage?
So the first thing would probably be, we just have to be aware that we're all susceptible to that, right?
Yeah.
You can't monitor for something if you think you're above it. So I would always start there of just know that you are capable of self-sabotage and you also have done it. There's no way you haven't. Right at this point, right? If you live long enough, you're gonna do it probably a number of different times. So you want to be aware that that is a possibility, and then that way you can be more aware of managing it, but also understanding that other people, the right people, play a role in helping you be aware of that too, right? There's two main parts to why we as humans seek relationship. The obvious that we all kind of think of immediately is like, well, I want to have my needs met, right? I want to, have a sense of community and an emotional space and somebody to do things with. Like, yes, we're social creatures. But then the other piece to relationships that not everyone likes, but you have to get to a place where you at least tolerate it, but hopefully appreciate, is that relationships exist to be a mirror for our self-development. And so when you're in a healthy enough relationship with somebody, and healthy would mean that that person is in a healthy enough relationship with themselves, right? Because that's how it works. If I meet somebody and I really like them or dislike them, and if for a second I take my own biases out, like let's say I'm checking myself at the door and I really am just taking this person in, what I'm observing is their relationship with themselves. That's what I'm observing. Oh, I love your level of self-awareness, or oh, I do not like the low emotional intelligence, or right, like that's about that person and their skill set with themselves. So you have to find someone who's in a healthy enough relationship with themselves, and they can serve as a really good mirror for you and be like, oh, girl, did you notice that you be self-sabotage?
Right.
And it can help you, right? And it can help you because it really is a gift getting that feedback from people. Because then it's like, wow, you just helped me up my self-awareness. And I want more people to understand that it's a gift. Like, it doesn't feel good to realize something about ourselves that maybe we didn't notice before in terms of behaviors we don't like. But how else do you fix it if you don't embrace that truth and its presence? So it's really about rewiring the brain and reconditioning yourself to see those that feedback as, and in my book I talk about it being the door to the next version of you. It's like somebody has interacted with you and they're like, hey, you do this. And at that moment, when they say that, you have a choice. You either get defensive and reject it, which is going to be you deciding, I don't want to walk through a door and become a better version of myself. or you embrace it and you sit in that discomfort, because those emotions exist for your change, right? Yeah. Negative emotions are there to be calls to action in one way or another. So that's why you don't feel good. Yeah. Right? Because if somebody was like, hey, you have an attitude problem and you're just happy, right? You're not going to change. Right? You have to feel negative emotion to be like, oh, my brain is telling me like something has to be different here. I'm uncomfortable. And so if you can take it, walk through a door, well, through practice and all that, you can walk through a door and become a better version of yourself.
Yes. So. Okay. I love that. And I guess what are some habits you feel like are easier to change than others? Because I feel like so many times that self-sabotage kind of leans on your habits too. And that's another thing that I feel like that rewiring, it literally comes down to like, you've done this for so long, you realize that's not the perfect way to do it. So like
instant gratification is a challenge for us as humans.
So true.
Yeah, like that kind of goes back to our conversation earlier about internet, right? Like and having these apps and being able to just buy things. So instant gratification is challenging. There are ways for you to recondition yourself to handle that better. I'm sure we've all kind of seen those videos where like somebody will put a piece of candy or something in front of their kid and they'll be like, okay, I'll be right back. And if you wait, then I'll give you more or whatever. So you can do that with yourself.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Right. You can be like, okay, I saw these Nikes or something that I really, really want. But I also know that it maybe wouldn't be best to buy that right this second. So I'm going to make a plan, right? Set aside X amount of money each time I get paid, so then I can buy those Nikes. If you practice things like that over time, you will help your own brain have more tolerance for delayed gratification. Right. Matter of fact, that's really important to do, not just to buy things, but honestly, because instant gratification is why people also make a lot of relationship mistakes and all of that too. You just like, oh, they're cute, I'll marry them. It's like, like let's get to know them and slow down and all of that, right? So you really do want to be rewiring your brain around gratification. And it can even be as simple as like, oh, I bought myself a cookie this morning, but I'm not going to eat it until tomorrow. Like there's so many ways to practice,
So true.
And sit in that discomfort. So I would definitely say that habit could be a challenge. Were there any other ones that you've come across with like people you have worked with that they're struggling with?
My best friend, I will say we had to learn the fact that it wasn't instant gratification for her. It's just that tangible element for her. So because she can see the shoes, she can see the things, but like utilities, you're not seeing that electricity go out every day. You're not seeing those things. And so it was harder for her to grasp onto, it was easier for her to pay the credit card bill than it was the utilities. Because at one point that was just a thing where it's kind of like, I don't see the gain from it. But I see the gain from going to Target tomorrow and wasting $300. And so it was a tangible outcome that made her like appreciate the spend versus the other side of it being like, I didn't physically see it go anywhere. So I'm almost wasting my money.
That makes a lot of sense. So I'm such a fan of being creative to meet yourself where you're at to get to where you want to be. I'm like, you don't understand the value of like your utilities and your electricity. Deliberately turn the shit off in your house.
Yeah.
Like, and I know that stuff, but like you did that, you're gonna be like, wow, I really do appreciate electricity and everything. Like you can just go to your basement, turn it off, and then see how that is. Because that would be the reality if you didn't pay. You know, so sometimes we really have to intentionally like do exercises or like role plays of stuff to really help us be grateful for certain things and to value them better. Because that's what I would be like, let's see what it's like about these utilities. Right. I bet you'll prefer that more than the stuff you got at Target. Because we've all been there, right? Like where the power goes out in your neighborhood or something, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't do anything. You still like turning the light switch on and it doesn't work.
That's how I test it out.
Yeah, it's just the conditioning. You're like, oh yeah, that's not the case, right? Let me get a candle.
Yeah. That is actually one of the first things I put on my wedding registry was a generator. Because I'm like, I don't want that to be a thing that like automatically goes out and we're stuck. So yes, I definitely feel like that is a thing that you underestimate until you don't have it.
Yes, that's true, y'all. Like for all the little things that you take for granted every day that really truly make your life so much more richer. And you have I talk about this in the book in a different part too, around just rewiring and understanding that technically for the vast majority of us, we have so many more opportunities and sources for happiness than we do like the neutral or the negative. It's just that you take a lot of the things for granted, right? You take for granted when you hear your child's laugh. You take for granted when you step outside and the fresh air hits your nostrils. You take for granted that you can get in your car and get where you need to very quickly. Like, imagine if you had a horse and buggy, like for real. And so if we remind ourselves of like, dang, even though I'm faced with hardship and all of that stuff, because we all are from time to time, there's endless, like literally endless sources for things to be grateful for. And when you allow yourself to sit in those things, that really helps you have more energy for navigating the negative. Sure. So it can be an important thing to do.
That makes sense. Another element I feel like I come across is almost like a blame game in a sense on the financial. Like it's due to this, it's due to that, or I wasn't raised this way. That repetition has almost conditioned them to only think that one way. And so when it comes to those conversations with myself, it's not even just self-sabotage. It's almost like I'm having to convince them that they can't get out of the spot.
Yeah, it's conditioning is such a powerful force. And so many people were conditioned to have a very fixed mindset. Yeah. We see it in so many different ways, the financial pieces of things, or people owning their growth areas as their personality, right? Like the person who's like, oh, I always have a bad attitude. It's like, baby, nobody taught you how to regulate your emotions. It's not your personality. It's a lack of skill, right? And skills can be learned, right? Take it from somebody who, like, many years ago, I was very angry, right? But I learned emotional regulation and I got some trauma therapy, right? That wasn't my personality. It was trauma. So we really have to understand that it's imperative we don't have a fixed definition of who we are, what we're capable of.
Yeah.
You really have to unlearn that conditioning from trauma.
My other and maybe my last question I had actually written down that I'm sure we'll get into something else, but ADHD and finances. I personally, I feel like I learned a lot of my habits of doing things because my mom is also ADHD, but never ever diagnosed. But I learned a lot of my traits from her, like hiding my money for myself. I just do random things that I feel like allows me to say like, oh, I'm saving, but it's really just in a box that I don't openly see how much is there. So it's less tendency for me to actually go tap it or pull something out of. So like I'm gonna do some creative things just personally.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, does it work? Because
it does. Really well. And I've really tried every method out there, from envelopes to cash method. I've tried everything, especially just being in the industry I'm in. I've tested everything from every app. I've downloaded over like 20 some odd apps for budgeting just to understand which one's better.
Seriously, Dee, because like, again, it's the trial and error to figure out what works for us. So like, that's wonderful that you did that. That's you self-advocating and saying, okay, I have a problem. I want to find a solution for it, but I also understand that that's going to take some trial and error. So you download 20 apps, but look at you now, right? Like, the things that work for you. So that's great.
And I'm also, able to like recommend other apps to other people now just based off of like, oh, how do you interact with your money already? I can tell you a lot of other things too. But yeah, but what are your, I guess, some tips for those around ADHD or have other tendencies that they're not even aware that how the ADHD affects their money?
Yeah, so ADHD, well, first of all, anything with cognition is so nuanced and complex. I personally kind of believe that with just where the research is going, what we call like the neurodivergent spectrum versus the neurotypical spectrum, I think it's just one big spectrum that we all fall on,
Yeah.
right? Like every single one of us. In one place, in one way or another, right? And then where you fall is also going to change as you practice skills and things like that, right? Like a person who has learned how to kind of work with their experiences of ADHD is going to move on that like, right? Like they're not going to be the same as they were before when they didn't even know they had ADHD or whatever. So it is really a lot of trial and error. For ADHD, a lot of the things that work for people is like you did, like the out of sight, out of mind thing. That would work really well for finances because the whole point is you're trying to save. So like put your money somewhere where you can't where you're like not going to see it all the time or remember it's there because literally that's like a good forgetting, right? I'm saying that's what you want. So you can definitely do that. I love all the like new technology that helps people too. Like what app are you using that you feel is working best for you?
I have two different apps, I would say. I actually had my own app earlier this year. So that is something I'm getting back to my goal for next year. But yeah, so because I realized there's really no perfect app out there, I tried to create my own. But it was just
hire somebody. You gotta
well, yeah, no, it was a white label situation, and that's the reason why it didn't really work out because certain things I feel like you should be able to adjust your budget like accordingly, and that was a thing that they couldn't do, and so our contract pretty much didn't work out because we couldn't see eye to eye on how to display the budget in the best way. So my goal is next year is to actually manufacture and do all of those things with a partner to make it happen because I'm like, I have a vision. I've literally written this down. Like I recommend a lot of different apps, but I also say like one day I'll have mine again.
And for you, because you tried so many, you were able to see what works well, what doesn't. You can kind of take those elements and put them into your app and make a superior app. So that's awesome.
And that's the thing. Like I've learned like things that work from other apps and what didn't work. But my favorite app, I'm literally pulling it up right now, is going to be my go-to spreadsheet. But other than that, I actually have two different apps that I use pretty often. One of them was called, and just changed the name. Let's see. It used to be Emma, but I want to say it's something starts with an O now. Or Orpington.
Orbita?
Yeah, so OPORTUN. So they got a new management situation, but I do like their setup. And then money management is another app. I'm not sure if it's a Android only, but there are a couple apps out there that are like either Apple only or Android only. So that's what I've literally tested them all at one point.
That's you. Even though I know at the time you were kind of doing it to figure out what worked. It doubles because you were gathering data to help your goals. It's very smart. It's like going to a bunch of open houses, years before you want to buy a house because you're figuring out what you want.
That's
what you were doing. It doubled and it has its benefits. So
I'm working on getting my own spreadsheets. So they're done for you spreadsheets I already have created. So all you have to do is plug in your numbers. All the formulas are already created for you. But that will be up by the end of this year. So literally within next week. Me and my assistant are working on that now. So there's done for you, and then also have a calculator formulated in there. So one of my favorite books I always recommend to people is Profit First book.
Oh yeah. I've never read it, but I'm familiar with it.
So it's based off of percentages because so many people have different concepts of like just your income in general. It's easier for pretty much you to balance out your expenses, your overhead things for business and everything else, separating it by percentages. And so I have a calculator where you literally just plug in your revenue and it'll do the percentage breakdown for you too. So yeah, I have a lot of things brewing right now, but it's just because I realize there's nothing else out there perfect that I'm just going to create my own.
That's so cool. See, there's always room for improvement, and yes. Like you're like, hey, I see a gap, I see a problem. Let me fill it real quick. That's awesome. That's
absolutely, yeah. I have a really big goal for next year is literally incorporating what we're talking about now, the overall full financial wellness, where I bring in therapists, I want to bring in life coaches, I want to bring in everybody that really can tie into the financial world. And life insurance, all things in-house that can be one space. They can also educate and help out the whole household. So I want the kids to the grandparents being able to come in into this space and really be the on-site screenings. I want to have the opportunities for, just because so many communities don't have that just coming to them. So I want to bring that to the community. So I feel like your mental, your health, and everything else is still going to tie into your finances.
I was already sitting here earlier. I was like, in my head when you were talking, I was like, yeah, because I'm going to be doing like mental health retreats in the near future. And I'm like, Deahna's going to have to come.
No, I'm actually working on a retreat myself. So yes, I love it.
Need, like, it's all understanding how all this works together, because so many were kind of pulled from understanding that, first of all, the foundation for everything in your life ultimately, right, with how you're going to move through life and how well, a lot of it comes back down to just how well you take care of this.
Yeah.
And then also seeking knowledge, right? And so mental health is at the foundation, but we also have to help you understand how it's like showing up in all these different areas so that you can really be managing yourself really well.
Yeah. And I also think that there's so much that we don't realize overlaps until it's too late. And that's where, like, if you have these things coming about, even if it's like a 1 or 2 day situation, so many can still learn, or at least somebody in the household can learn something that can be tied to the next generation learning something too.
Yes. So, generational wealth is the goal, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's one thing I feel. I've baby boomer parents. And so I have a whole household of like 3 different generations in itself. My brother just turned 40 something. I cannot remember what it is now, but myself just turning 32. It's just kind of like one of those things that we all talk about money totally different. And I have a running theory right now that your love language also represent how you treat your money. And so like mine is, like the quality time. You need to literally sit down, do your budget. Need to sit there and do it. And those who need physical touch, or those who need to be cash oriented. So I got deep into this. Like, I know there's an overlap somewhere, and I want to get more into understanding it, because so many people like, oh yeah, I know my love language, but they don't know how to handle their money. So like, it's tied together at the end of the day.
No, it is. Everything is.
Yeah.
Like everything is. Everything is, because it's you, and it's you navigating your life.
Yes.
It's one massive like Venn diagram of things, and everything connects.
Yeah.
And just you really are capable of achieving things that maybe you haven't seen in your own like family or whatever it may be. It's just a learned helplessness. But again, once we know what something is, we can protect ourselves from it, right? Like it's the lack of knowledge that is our biggest issue. It's the fact that we still have not implemented systems, which is, it's heartbreaking, because like, again, we are the creators of all of this, so we can do this at any time, but we have not implemented any kind of systems to just be teaching these things from kindergarten. So that people are not then reliant on just hoping and praying that the people who gave birth to this child are educated on these things, right? Like, you shouldn't have to just depend on your parents or whoever for things like financial, knowledge or emotional intelligence or whatever, because what if they don't have that? What if they don't have any of that, right? To give you, and then now you're having to scramble and figure that out later in life. But if we just use school, like, of course, the way we use school now, generally speaking, is like, it makes sense, right? We do have to learn all these different topics, but we should also be doing more in these other areas, like the mental health, the financial, all of that stuff, because those things are going to be central to your adult life. And mental health is central to your life from birth. But so yeah, we just got to do better.
I agree. Yeah. There's actually, out of the 50 states, there's only 18 of them that require financial literacy by senior year. So,
wow.
Yeah. And it's only like 12 of those 18 that is actually like required. Otherwise, it's just like part of the curriculum, and or they don't have to take it if they're on whatever course. So, yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, that's the reason why like people like Tiffany Aliche with Budgetnista, her making a law in I think New Jersey or New York, Newark. Yeah, I can't remember exactly where, but she made a whole law in her state because there's not enough, and it's kind of like, if we can do it in one state, why are we not doing it anymore? But there's so many other people who are like making small changes, but not realizing there needs to be such a bigger change involved. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I personally believe to some degree it's for sure by design, in the sense that we have, because of all the centuries at this point of mental health neglect. And again, we're not shaming our ancestors because one, we didn't know what you don't know what you don't know. And so we didn't know the importance of all this stuff then. Science was like, we knew nothing, right? We knew nothing about the brain. We knew nothing about mental health. We didn't. So there was a lot of mistakes obviously made because we're learning as we go. But now, unfortunately, because of all of that mental health neglect and the lack of empathy being taught and all of that, we have a lot of people in positions of power that lack really important emotional and mental health skills like empathy, perspective taking, accountability, etc. So then by design, it's like, well, how do we keep people, what I like to refer to as thinking that they're sheep. So like you got shepherds and sheep, right? We've all were sheep at one point. Some of us still are, right? And it's not a bad thing. It just simply means that your experiences have kind of led you to not realizing how powerful you are. A good shepherd, what they do is they try to gather you. And then once they've taught you things and all that, they're like, hey, get off the floor. You're a shepherd, right? Like that's the ultimate goal. They're like, no, you're not a sheep. Stand up, right? You are equal to me, right? But we have people in power who are shepherding, but what they do is when they capture you, they make you more of a docile sheep.
Yeah.
So, because you're easier to control, manipulate, all of that. And it's really sad because it's silly. It's silly that like we haven't just started teaching these things to everybody. Like it doesn't make any sense. So then you have to say, well, what motivation would humans have to not do that? Oh, control, manipulation, right? Money, those kind of things. And it's just really sad because we as a species would thrive so much if we all were nurturing the skill of empathy. We'd be kumbaya in the streets. It would be so easy to find emotional support. You could just step outside. If you were home alone and crying because you got bad news, you could just step outside and somebody would come and hug you and talk to you. But like, since we're not nurturing this as much as we should, we're not there yet. And we have people that we're putting in power that really don't give a crap about you. So really sad.
It is absolutely that. Because we've learned nothing, history repeats itself, and that's the sad part to hear. That's what I'm like. We learned something from 2008 that we didn't repeat necessarily this go around. That we're so close to doing the same thing all over again. So it's just
over and over and over. Like it's really sad. Like I even with hate, I talk about, I'm like, don't y'all realize that y'all just keep choosing different parts of natural diversity and then hating people for it? Oh, you have melanin, I hate you. Oh, you're this, I hate you. Like you're gay, I hate you. It's like all of that is just natural diversity of the human experience. Yeah. We're just doing that over and over. What's next? You're gonna hate people who have blue eyes. You're gonna hate, like, we just keep choosing diversity, like natural diversity, and then being like, I'm gonna hate this group of people. It's
it's exhausting. You would think.
So exhausting.
We have somehow done it all over again.
All over again, and just continuously so, because people are sheeping. Like that's what's happening. It's just you're being conditioned to be hateful, and you don't question that or whatever. You just follow it. And this is why everyone needs to remember the powerful force they are, but in like a healthy way, and respectful of everyone else's power too. That's the goal.
Absolutely agreed. you said something else that I wrote down. That I just don't know where I wrote it. um,
Talking, so I can't.
no, you're fine. I was like, I just wrote it down, and I was like, it looks like gibberish now when I was writing. So clearly, I was looking at you and writing. Um, oh, okay. So the learn sense that you were talking about.
Yeah.
I feel like that is something that also, if you're not in the environment to learn it, how can you go about seeking that, I guess?
Yeah. So in this day and age, like we have knowledge at our fingertips every day if you have a phone, right? Back in the day, we would have had to go, to a library or or something like that. But now you can just, when you don't know something, just Google it. Yeah. Now, still be careful. The internet is filled with people who wake up to put false information on it. You should always fact check and check multiple sources for and against whatever it is you're looking at. But nonetheless, I would just recommend using the free knowledge you have all the time at your fingertips, watching documentaries, reading more books, and just remembering that you are here to learn and to keep growing and all of that. I think it's a great practice to just try to learn something new every day. Yeah. Right. Like something just small, new word or, definition of a new word, and then, challenge yourself to use it the next day. Or, I always recommend people just look up a random psychology term so that you can understand yourself better, right? Because everything you Google related to psychology is literally the cheat code to the human experience. So I don't know about you, but I love learning this. I'm trying to.
Yeah. That's actually what my dad got his degree in.
That's so cool.
And then my best friend has her associates in it as well. So it's kind of I'm around people who talk about it, but also my dad graduated almost 40 years ago. So it's not he still is learning anything day to day, but it's kind of at the same time he's oh, that's my background, and he sits on that. I'm like, you changed your major 4 times just to get there, but sure.
Yeah. We're always learning more, right? Because especially with psychology, it's a science, so science is always advancing. So we have to keep learning as technology gets better, our testing gets better, more longitudinal studies are done and all of that. So, but yeah, just try to learn a new thing every day. I know there's a lot of things, but just try to or maybe even choose a couple categories that you desire to just kind of focus on increasing your knowledge. Maybe you're okay, finances, emotion, and then maybe something else. And then each evening you just take 10 minutes to look up one thing in that thing. And before you know it, you'll know so much more.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's one thing I will say. I've been in my business for 6 years, and every year I do accelerator, or I have a new coach, or I have something that I'm always pouring back into it. And then also I'm doing CRE credits, which are only really if you have a CPA, you really need the CRE credits, but I will take those courses just for the fun of it, just to stay up to date with what's changing. But those are things that are in my industry. I enjoy those. But so many people, I feel don't do that, or they don't pour into what they have already got, so their degree in, or whatever the case. But that's what makes me enjoy what I'm doing so much more, because I'm learning the new things, and I'm learning how to take those tools and change and really make new things happen for not just myself, but for other people too. So
yeah. Some of why people probably aren't as driven to do that is partially because we have a lot of people who are living a life of performance and have no idea who they are or what they want. So there are a lot of accountants that don't want to be accountants. Yeah. They're not going to be passionate about
100% that.
We're so, because people have been discouraged, a lot of people anyway have been discouraged from birth, from discovering who they are authentically. They're living a whole life of performance with the wrong job, wrong relationship. They don't know what they actually like or dislike. They have no idea. So it's kind of like being on a stage and performing 24/7 with no end, until you realize that at any time you can get off the stage and go figure out who you actually are. Yes. And stop listening to people who have never experienced your body or brain before. Nobody can tell you who you are. Only you can, through your own open-minded self-excellence. Right. And challenging the things you were taught. But that's why there's Some of these people are like, oh, look, I'm just doing this to put some food on the table. I'm not trying to learn nothing else. But if you're like actually passionate about what you do, then you want to learn more about it. I talk about psychology every single day. Like it's constant. I love it. I genuinely love you, and I love learning this stuff.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I had something else. I just keep losing it as soon as I'm like, I get so involved with what you were saying. I'm like, yeah. I was like, I had a thought, and then the ADHD thing is real. But I can't remember what I was going about. Oh, so I am newly engaged, and thank you. And I feel like so many people are like,
I saw your video. I feel. Did you post a video?
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did see your video. Yes. I remember. Mm-hmm.
Yes, he did a great job. I was definitely like, had no idea what was coming. But so many people were like, oh, I can't wait for your content around marriage and talking more about like finances. And I'm like, I didn't even think about that being a thing in my content until like people were like, oh, I can't wait. What are you waiting on? I've never even shared my regular numbers. So I'm like, now you want to know numbers? So it's just interesting to me. But do you have any advice for newlyweds going into financial conversations? Because for me, I feel like I've naturally done it. He just knows that's who I am. But there's so many people who just kind of like, that's a topic of taboo almost. That's kind of like, how do I even step on those eggshells?
So really hard to grow in relationship with anybody if you're not having honest, open conversations. Vulnerability is required for healthy relationships, and so is healthy conflict. So if you're trying to get married and you don't want to talk about your finances, please know, that like one of the highest reasons for divorce is finances. So that's not gonna be. And then you also want, again, not trying to tell people how to like live in terms of dynamic. But what I will say is that historically, and what research has found, is that like traditional ideas of especially heterosexual dynamics, like traditional around that, pretty oppressive, right? And not good for overall mental health. So again, you're allowed to live more of the old school kind of traditional role if that's what works for you. But research has found that it can be very oppressive, especially for heterosexual women. So another alternative way is to have more of a modern relationship where everyone understands that they're an adult, a capable adult, and equal, and to work together as a team and to have conversations around these things on a regular basis, finances and other things too. But for sure, just having like check-ins, I think it's great for couples or people in partnership in general to just have like, you don't have to be weekly, but weekly is great. But like at least monthly conversations of checking in about all things. Finances, how emotionally supporting each other is going, having the tree remembers but the axe forgets conversations, right? How have I maybe hurt you in ways that we haven't had time to process in this past week or month? Like if you are having honest, open conversations on a regular basis, then you will become more and more of a well-oiled machine. And I always share with clients too that if you are doing a relationship of any kind, romantic or not, the right way, what that means is you are having difficult conversations from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right. The hardest parts of relationships should be in the beginning, generally speaking. Now, of course, if life throws a curveball your way or something, then that's going to be different. But relationships should be getting easier if you are actually taking the time to get to know each other. Yeah. The hardest part of my relationship with my husband was in the beginning, right? We're learning each other's trauma histories and trauma responses. We're learning how to communicate well with one another. We're learning about each other. Right, in the beginning, but now we're a well-oiled machine, right? Like we understand each other very well, we communicate very well, but that's not how things started. We had to have the difficult conversations and the holding the mirror up to each other, self-development stuff to be able to get to where we're at today. Where like that's why I hate when people are like, marriage is hard. I was like, speak for yourself. My marriage is very easy. Like he's my best friend. We talk easily about things, but that's not how things always were, right? You had to work to get to that point. So you want to do the hard work in the beginning because that's the only way to know if this is somebody you can genuinely grow with. right? And if you're not having those conversations, you're going to find out after you're already invested, have a child, possibly all kinds of, why would you want that? You want to be like, no, this is my business plan. I can talk to them about everything. They're not insecure. They're not trying to stop me from being my authentic self. I'm being respected, like all of those different things. Relationships are not about control. They're not about any of this toxic stuff that a lot of us had modeled. You should still be yourself, right? It's just two people or more, because not everyone's monogamous, but coming together and deciding to share their life. You're not losing you shouldn't be losing yourself.
Right. No. I'm like, as you're talking, I'm like, I'm excited because I'm in that state. I love it. I love where I'm at, and I love.
And that's how it's supposed to be. You should be excited, easy, and you did the work, right? Like if y'all get to being engaged, there should have been a lot of difficult conversations along the way where you're like, no, but we good, right? And if something comes along, when I guess, something does come where life, maybe something challenging is happening in one of you all's families or something like that, you've worked to nurture like your communication skills and your all that. So like, even though you're maybe going through something challenging, like there's some challenging stuff right now going on in my side of the family and in my husband at the same time, and literally all unfolded on the same day. Can't make this stuff. But because like it was like we're like, what is going on? Like I literally had some text messages come through at like 8 p.m. and then he got a phone call from his mom about a whole different situation at like 3 a.m. the same like day. We're like, what is going? Is Mercury in retrograde? What the hell? But like because we're so deeply emotionally connected, we've been able to support each other and navigate through these things. Yeah. But that's why the quality of relationships really depend on the quality of your relationship with yourself. Like that's what, right? If your emotional intelligence is lower and all of that stuff, that will impact the quality of the couple or whatever it may be.
Yeah. And I'm a definitely stickler with our monthly budget dates. So those are things that like was from the start.
We made money important.
Exactly.
So we gotta learn how to work with it.
Yeah. Especially with us, I feel like the content world of everybody, like you said from the very start, the fact that so many people can see the other side or the grass is greener on the other side aspect, that you forget to appreciate and be grateful for where you're at. And that is so much I feel like the mental plays with the finances like 100%, but also the fact of like, oh, when you were talking about like, this is how it could be or how it should be, or I'm like, those are thoughts. I'm like, I don't think I thought about it as deeply with other relationships until I got to this point. And I'm like, I'm glad I did it because I know somebody else had so much more debt and I was glad that wasn't going to be mine.
Understandable, yeah.
Yes. So like we talked about it, but I never thought about myself marrying into that. So it was a whole other thought process. So yeah.
That is a lot. Like
that
is a problem. Like it really does impact your life in so many ways. So no, I can definitely understand that because you're like, I'm signing up for this.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes people don't, or they try to not share finances when married, but in my professional experience with clients where that's happening, it causes a lot of issues in the relationship.
Yeah.
Because it's like, how are we building a life together?
It's not teamwork. Yeah.
It's not working as a team. But it's also like you got to respect what people feel like they think is best for them. So, but remember, it's the motivational interviewer, right? It's like, I'm hearing this, right? But this is what y'all are doing, and let me help you see. Like you're maybe feeling really unhappy because your partnership isn't partnershiping, right? Like, like separate. Like, and when it comes to finances, two separate like households, even though you're one household. Yeah. So you're like, you're separate people, but like finances are connected. You're
Yeah. Me and my fiance already started with a shared credit card, and so those are like baby steps.
We have a shared like savings but separate debit accounts, and then my husband and I also have like an agreement. This has been even when we were just dating, that like if it's something that costs $100 or more, we just talk to each other about it. Yeah. But otherwise, like it's just. Bond. Just get this.
I feel like I need to add that into play. It wouldn't hurt. Because I don't think we had like a number in place, but it's kind of like we'll talk to it if it's at a significant number type of thing.
Yeah, because you sometimes just also know you're like, this is a bigger purchase. Let's discuss it or whatever it may be. if you're just grabbing lunch, unless you're doing that all the time.
Yeah.
Because like Dee said, sometimes you spending $3,000 a year on Uber Eats, so then you might need to talk about that
by yourself.
So it does depend on what your spending looks like. But yeah, you find what works for you. But ultimately, it's just about understanding that if you're in relationship, you're hopefully acting like a team.
Yeah. Truly.
So that's what you wanted, right? A team.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. There is more than just paperwork. It is all of it.
Yeah. You want hopefully a best friend and somebody who builds you up while you're building them up, and you work as a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like we could talk all day, honestly.
So fun. I hope we'll go live.
No, I just love just the back and forth of us as well. I'm like, I feel like I need this conversation more than like a monthly situation, because I'm like, I have questions, they're getting answered. Then I'm like, I didn't know I needed that. So I appreciate it.
You gave me some apps that I'm gonna look at. No, I think somebody had asked about the second app. You said that one's called Money Management. I think we forgot.
Oh yeah. Money management. Mm-hmm.
We'll just call Money Management. I did see that comment. And then Brianna, you asked, where can you find good coping skills? All over the place. I mean, if I'm just being frank, but also I saw somebody said that my book. Yes. Thank you for that, Batty. So yeah, like my book is filled with knowledge for everything, managing emotions, thoughts, and behaviors. There's an endless amount of coping skills of all kinds covered throughout the book. Every chapter covers a different part of the human experience, and I teach you about that phenomenon in the first half of the chapter, and then I teach you how to apply that knowledge, right, in real time through real steps. And every chapter is a different thing, like trauma's in there, anxiety management's in there, decision making and there's a chapter on decision making and problem solving, learned helplessness, which we were talking about earlier, to protect yourself from depression, and just self-sabotage in general. So every chapter is a different thing. If you want, I don't want TikTok to get mad at me, but I might be able to get away with it for a second. We'll see. Try to pin if I can in here, but it might, because it's like, oh, this is not what you said this was about. Look, they're not even letting me. So if you want to just be able to go see, I'm actually going to get back on live once we finish, because I have a couple book orders to pack, so I can do that while I'm on live. So before I go to the post office. So then if you join me in that live, you'll be able to see the book and the table of contents and everything. But you also can just go to my page. You just go to my page and use my LINK tree. Look, y'all, TikTok does not like me. I got flagged yesterday because I told people to go to Amazon. I even can't even say that correctly.
That's funny. They are really trying on their last few days out here.
So if you're ever like, because I know you're making like stuff that you're going to be selling in terms of products, and you might do it on here. Just find like creative ways to say these words. So like instead of saying the way we would typically say it, I say Amazon. And that usually does not get flagged. So Andrea taught me that Audacity is the plug talk of it. That's how she says it, and she doesn't get flagged. But yeah, everything is on my page. There's a LINK in my BIO, like everything, my website, all of that. But outside of my book, there are endless sources for coping skills. I'm also happy to send people free resources as well if you just DM me your email address. I'm a therapist, so I have a bunch of like coping skill worksheets and
Oh yeah, I'm about to say, like, I'm probably coming back to you for that because when you said trauma earlier, I'm like, yeah, money trauma, stressors, those things, as soon as it's triggered, I know for myself because I'm an emotional spender. So like I'm fully aware. It doesn't change when I'm ready to go shop, especially during the season of holidays. I feel like I have an excuse to not go shop. So we all have our own stressors and we all have our own triggers. But I feel like that is one thing that so many of us kind of ignore sometimes because it's such a thing. It comes up.
Have you
seen trauma is not something we're trying to go back and repeat.
Documentary yet on Netflix? I haven't finished it.
No, I haven't.
The Buy Now. Have you heard about it?
I have heard about it, but yeah, I haven't gone and seen it yet.
I'm like, oh, she probably watched that the day it dropped. But yeah, I haven't finished it, but I do want to. I'm gonna start it over because I had started on a day where I got distracted and
Understood.
But I heard one of my therapy clients watched it and was like, "It's a lot. Like, it's a very eye opening. It's emotional, and it's just showing how we're like destroying ourselves almost with how we're spending and destroying the planet."
Now I feel like that's tonight's documentary. Okay.
Like, especially for what you do, yeah, if you are open to it, check it out. From what I've heard about it, like it would help you in your work with clients for sure.
I can definitely see that.
So once I watch it, and if you watch it too, we can come back on here and
yes, I'm here for it because I think I have to watch everything else on money related on Netflix, but that is one of those I feel like I haven't sat there down just to take it all in yet. But yeah,
it's new, so you're like not late. I think it just came out like 2 months ago. It's not.
I remember when it was saying it was coming, but yeah, I haven't actually gone to do it. But yeah, I feel like your worksheets. Just know my email's coming to you.
Oh yeah, for sure. I probably send you like a crazy amount of things. That way you just have a bunch of resources. Yeah. So anything that I think could help you, I'll just put in the email and hopefully I can put all the attachments. Otherwise I'll send 2 emails. but yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy. There's also I'll write this website down. I'll put it in the email too, but therapistaid.com ? If it's not .com, then it's .org, but I think it's .com. Therapistaid.com is great because like that's where a lot of my worksheets and stuff come from. So if there's something that you are like you're working with a client and something comes up and you're like, how do I help them with this? You can literally go type that thing in.
Okay.
And find all kind of resources on there. So yeah, therapistaid.com is great. And that's for everybody, y'all. You don't have to be a therapist alone.
No, I feel like even when the worksheets you were talking about, I'm like, that would be a nice pairing with some because I have so many different like one-off sheets, but the mental to go along with the actual money exercise, I feel like would be a good tie together too. But yeah, my goal next year is really just to go into everything with a holistic approach because it really starts with the mental and everything else kind of floats from there. And there's no changing. History has repeated that on repeat. We know it's going to happen. We all have to handle money. It's just how we handle it is literally the key to it all.
Yep. No, for real. That is the takeaway, y'all, is just that everything starts with you and the quality of the relationship that you are fostering with yourself, and that you need other humans, but the right ones, to help you and guide you on that. So really question the source, Somebody trying to give you advice on something, just, be weary about like, okay, what does this person actually know? Or are they just kind of regurgitating things that were told to them? And observe how other people's lives are going. And, generally speaking, you might want to take more advice and guidance from people who have lives that look more similar to what you desire for yourself. So yeah. Don't neglect.
I literally did a YT situation last week, and we were talking about advice to younger self. Be you. Be your original self. Don't ever switch up just because those of you around. I promise you'll go further as yourself.
So we're supposed to be living authentically, y'all. And again, you got to remember too, the trauma around stripping people of their individuality is rooted in a history where we, like humans, ancestors, they did not know that people were unique individuals. But we know that now. Like like scientifically know that. Like that is just a fact. But they didn't know. They were like, oh, everybody with the same genitalia is supposed to like the color blue. Like that's what they thought. And it was
right.
That's not how this works. So figure out who you actually are, but you have to do that from a place of open-mindedness and understand that your chromosomes and genitalia have absolutely nothing to do with who you actually like are in terms of interests and sexuality, and like that. Those things are part of your unique brain chemistry, and you have to explore and have fun exploring and being open-minded and really shedding yourself of the limited ways of thinking for your happiest life. Right? So nothing's true like all the time for any of us. Yes, we have shared identities, but you take a bunch of Black women, for instance, and you're going to find way more differences between us than you would the same stuff, especially if we're all living authentically, right? You know, have the Black woman over here that loves anime, and the one over here that likes video games, and the one whose favorite color is blue. We're unique people, okay?
Absolutely not.
We'll be unique so the world can start looking like a fashion runway, and we can go outside and see some interesting self-expression. What I want to live in.
Hilarious.
Not y'all dressing all the same and doing all this. Like, come on, let's be exciting.
The unique trend be unique.
Be yourself, right? The people are asking me, why are you dressed up? Let's say, like, because life is an event. And I like what I'm wearing right now. Like, literally, enjoy yourself. You are free. I know that you've maybe been conditioned to feel otherwise, but you are free. We are all free.
Absolutely that. Yeah, I will definitely say I appreciate me figuring that out in my 20s, because it's made my 30s now more, it's not even, I don't have to adjust. I know this is me. And that is because when I quit corporate, it was very much when I quit everything else. And I did that at 26, and I have no regrets. Like, I knew where I was going after that, and God has led me to exactly where the plans have been. So yeah.
No, because when you're doing the work and you're like living in your purpose, you just keep getting provided more clarity on what to do next, an opportunity. It flows, just flow. We're on a floating planet, y'all.
Yes.
in literally a galaxy that is probably one of infinite galaxies. We are still learning. We don't know what the hell's actually going on. So just enjoy it and have fun and be good to yourself and others. It all could be so simple. Really, that's
it really could. Yes. And financial literacy doesn't have to be something late in the day that you have to figure it out either. There's so many things that you can figure it out tomorrow. Even the little things of figuring out what a budget is and what the right budget is for you. So yeah, just baby steps.
This is so great. This is so great. I love this. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Yes.
It was so nice formally meeting you. So I'm just glad we were able to find this time. I hope that we can do a live again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Yeah. Always open. I feel like this is conversations I'm never shy away from. So
and I hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for being here with us. For people who are interested, I'm probably going to get right back on live right after this, because I have a couple books to sign and then some books to pack. So if people want to learn a little more about my book, just come back to my live in 1 minute. I'm literally going to get right back. So, but yes, it was so nice seeing you, talking to you. Please just reach out anytime. Send me your email so I can flood you with a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it was such a joy.
Absolutely. Appreciate you.
Joy, right? Of course.
Love it. Have a good one.
You too.
Happy holidays to you.
Yes, happy holidays. Bye, y'all. I'll be right back.